Welcome back, deep divers. Today, buckle up, because we're diving into a case that's truly stranger than fiction. The story of Blanche Monnier,
Ah, yes, Blanche Monnier.
a French socialite who vanished for 25 years, only to be discovered living in, well, let's just say horrific conditions.
Absolutely, a chilling
We've
case.
got a whole stack of sources to sift through. YouTube documentaries, that fascinating Wikipedia rabbit hole, and even a really thought-provoking piece from Medium.com.
Always good to get a variety of perspectives.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to do today, right? We'll piece together not just what happened, but how in the world something so shocking could stay hidden for so long.
Especially in a society that considered itself civilized.
Right, so get ready to explore the dark side of human behavior and those societal norms that, well, sometimes allow terrible things to happen.
It's definitely a case that raises a lot of questions about, individual responsibility versus societal pressures.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture this. Poitiers, France, late 19th century, horse-drawn carriages, those charming cobblestone streets, the whole 9 yards.
A time of great social change, but also a time when appearances were everything.
And right in the heart of it all, you have the Monnier family living in this beautiful 3-story manor, affluent, respected, almost like local royalty.
And that's a key point. Their social standing made them practically untouchable. It's crucial to understand that context.
Definitely. Now, our main character in all of this, Blanche, was, by all accounts, a beautiful, gentle young woman, even a talented pianist, the classic image of a young socialite of that era.
Until she falls head over heels for this lawyer, a lawyer who, well, didn't quite meet dear old mom's standards.
Yeah, yes, Louise. Sounds like she was a force to be reckoned with. Controlling, obsessed with keeping up appearances, maybe even at the expense of her own daughter's happiness.
The sources definitely paint her as a formidable figure, someone who wielded her social power carefully.
And then, bam, Blanche just vanishes. Gone. Of course, the rumor mill goes into overdrive, right?
As it always does in these situations, the whispers start.
Maybe she was sent off to England. Or eloped with some dashing Scotsman.
Or maybe the whispers went she'd had a complete mental breakdown.
It's really interesting, though, how these rumors reflect the anxieties and, well, the prejudices of the time.
Exactly, a woman disappearing. There had to be a scandal, a secret.
But here's the twist. 25 years after Blanche vanishes, poof, an anonymous letter lands on the Attorney General's desk.
Talk about a bombshell. Out of the blue, this letter reveals a secret that's been festering for decades.
And it's a short, chilling letter, too, just stating the facts. A spinster was locked up in Madame Monnier's house.
Half-starved, it said, and living on a putrid litter for the past 25 years.
Can you imagine receiving that letter? The weight of it.
It's remarkable, really. The single letter was all it took to crack open this case.
It does make you wonder, though, who wrote it and why they waited so long to come forward.
Right. What were their motivations? And the bigger question, maybe, why didn't anyone else speak up sooner?
So we've got this anonymous tip. The police arrive at the Monnier house, and, well, I can only imagine the scene.
Oh, the sources don't hold back on the details. It's like something out of a Gothic novel, almost.
The police reports are incredibly descriptive, even mentioning that overpowering stench hitting them as they went up the stairs.
That smell, it just speaks volumes about what they were about to find.
They finally force their way into this room, and there she is.
Ah, Blanche.
Emaciated, naked, covered in filth, chained to the bed.
The Wikipedia article really lays it out there, all the horrific details. Covered in old food and feces with bugs all around the bed and floor.
It's tough to even imagine. It makes you wonder how someone could survive like that for so long.
55 pounds, the reports say. They had to remove this massive matted clump of hair along with kilograms of,
well,
filth.
And the Medium article really gets you thinking about it from Blanche's perspective, right? The darkness, that smell, the feeling of being chained to a bed for, well, a quarter of a century.
It's almost beyond comprehension. It makes her expressions of joy at simple things even more poignant.
Yeah, like that simple pleasure of sunlight or clean sheets.
Exactly. The things most of us take for granted.
So we've got Blanche finally freed. But that raises the question, what happens to Louise and Marcel, her captors?
Well, that's where things take another dark turn.
Oh.
Louise dies just 15 days after her arrest.
Wow.
Officially, heart failure. But you have to wonder if the stress and shame of it all caught up with her.
It's almost like she couldn't face the consequences of her actions.
And then there's Marcel, who faces trial, but the outcome is anything but straightforward.
What happened?
Well, the court ultimately accuts him. They argued there was no legal duty to rescue at the time.
Seriously, so he walks free even after all that.
He gets a slap on the wrist, a reprimand for his inaction, but no real punishment because the law didn't explicitly cover this kind of situation.
It just feels wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you think about our responsibility to those who depend on us, even within our own families.
It's a question that still resonates today. Where do the lines of responsibility blur?
Okay, so we have this horrific story of confinement. But then there's the mystery surrounding Blanche's mental state.
Right. Was this imprisonment the cause of her deterioration, or was there something there beforehand?
Some sources throw around diagnoses like anorexia, even schizophrenia. One even mentions coprophilia, which, and sorry if this is too much information for some listeners, is an abnormal interest in feces.
It was a different time, though, wasn't it? Our understanding of mental health has come a long way.
Exactly. What might be treatable today was often misunderstood, even misdiagnosed back then.
And the YouTube documentaries we looked at offer a different perspective based on newer research.
Like what?
Well, they suggest that Louise might have misinterpreted some of Blanche's behaviors, seeing them as mental illness when they weren't.
Hold on, so are we talking about a controlling mother who maybe twisted things to justify locking up her daughter?
It's certainly a possibility they explore. For example, there are reports of Blanche running around naked.
Okay, that's unusual.
Right. But was it rebellion or a symptom of something else? The sources raise that question, and she was already thin as a teenager.
So maybe that anorexia, if that's what it was already a factor.
Exactly. So suddenly the picture becomes even more complex.
You've got this domineering mother, a potentially mentally ill daughter, and a whole society that just seems to look the other way.
It's a recipe for tragedy, really.
And it makes you think, what really went on in that house?
That's the question that haunts this entire case, isn't it?
We've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover about the trial, the public's reaction, the whole social context that allowed this to happen.
And the ethical implications, too.
Right. How could Marcel just walk away?
It makes you wonder, how much has changed, really? And how much hasn't? It really makes you think about all the people around the Monniers, right?
Yeah, like who?
The neighbors,
Mhm.
the servants, the shopkeepers. Did any of them really suspect nothing? Or did they just choose to look away?
It's tough to say, right? But some of the sources do mention some, well, unsettling details.
Like what?
For instance, there were stories about people gathering outside Blanche's window when she was younger.
To do what?
Well, to watch her walk around naked, apparently.
Oh.
So were they aware of what was going on, at least to some extent?
Yeah.
And if they were, why didn't anyone do anything?
Right. It's a good question. And what about the servants who worked there, some for years? They had to have seen something.
Yeah, they must have at least noticed the smell, right? That room.
Absolutely. And one source even claims that a maid actually confronted Louise about Blanche's treatment. Well, if it's true, it makes you wonder why she didn't take it further, report it to the authorities or something.
Maybe she was scared.
That's likely. You have to consider the power dynamics of the time. Challenging someone like Louise Monnier, especially for a servant, could have had serious consequences.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the trial.
Okay.
The YouTube documentary we watched goes into a lot of detail about it, even sharing snippets from the trial transcripts.
I love when they do that.
Right. It's fascinating. And we see Marcel trying to build his defense, which basically boils down to claiming he had no idea what was happening.
How could he not know?
He claimed poor eyesight and a lack of sense of smell, so he said he couldn't see or smell anything.
That's a hard one to swallow.
Right. I mean, come on. The documentary even brings up this really bizarre detail from the trial where his lawyer tells this story.
What story?
Apparently, Marcel's friends once tricked him into eating, well, feces, disguised as strawberries.
Oh, God, that's just...
Yeah, it's disturbing on so many levels. And it makes you question Marcel's, well, everything. Was this just a strange quirk? Or was there something more going on with him mentally?
And did people know about this?
Exactly. Did his, let's say, eccentricities contribute to people dismissing concerns about Blanche?
It's a possibility, for sure.
Was he really oblivious to his sister's suffering? Or was he, as his lawyer argued, just too weak to stand up to his mother?
I mean, it's hard to say, isn't it? We just weren't there. But the trial does reveal some other intriguing details.
Dang.
Remember those letters Marcel wrote to Louise complaining about money?
Uh-huh.
Well, they suggest that maybe things weren't as rosy financially as they seem.
So were the Monniers actually struggling? I thought they were loaded.
Appearances can be deceiving, right? And then there's this. During the trial, evidence comes out that Louise was ordering fancy meals for Blanche.
Wait, fancy meals? But I thought she was being starved.
That's where things get even more complicated. The receipts show that she was getting food from a local hotel.
Okay, so maybe it wasn't deliberate starvation then.
It seems Louise might have been trying to, I don't know, provide for Blanche in her own way.
Twisted way, maybe.
Yeah, definitely twisted. And it's not like she was treating her well, you know?
Yeah.
The same receipts showed that the maids were told to only empty Blanche's soiled sheets, not wash them.
God, it's just...
Cruel, right. It's beyond just neglect. It points to a deliberate intention to make Blanche suffer.
So we have this picture of a family that's, well, completely messed up.
More than messed up.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just a case of an evil mother and an innocent victim.
Exactly. It's way more complicated than that.
There's secrecy, denial, and even this strange, distorted kind of love
Yeah,
that makes the whole story so unsettling.
absolutely. And we can't forget about how the public reacted to all of this, too.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, the sources all described this massive public outcry. People were outraged, demanding justice for Blanche. But then the judge acquits Marcel.
Yeah.
And that sparked even more controversy. I mean, how could he walk free after all that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It really exposed this huge gap in the legal system back then. There was no law to protect someone like Blanche.
That's hard to believe.
Right. It really makes you appreciate how much our legal systems have evolved and how this case might have actually contributed to our understanding of things like vulnerable adults and the need to protect them.
Absolutely. But it also makes you wonder, what if that letter had never been sent?
What do you mean?
I mean, would Blanche have just died in that room completely forgotten?
It's a terrifying thought.
It is, right.
Yeah.
It shows how powerful a single voice can be, even if it comes years too late.
And it makes you wonder if there are other Blanches out there right now, hidden away.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? It makes you question your own responsibility, you know?
Like, would we have the courage to be that voice? To speak up, even if it meant going against what everyone else is doing?
Exactly. It's easy to judge the people of Poitiers for their inaction, but would we have been any different?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Would we have had the guts to be the one to break the silence?
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now and talk about what happened to Blanche after her release.
Okay.
Because the sources paint this interesting and, honestly, somewhat hopeful picture of her. And it's hard to even fathom what it must have been like for Blanche to suddenly be thrust back into the world after 25 years.
Right. Like, can you imagine having to relearn basic things like how to eat with utensils or how to talk to people outside of your immediate family?
The sources mention that she was really gentle and polite, but clearly struggled to adapt to a life that had been, well, stolen from her.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to read that while she did seem to enjoy some things at the hospital, you know, those simple pleasures like sunshine and fresh air.
Yeah.
She also asked to be taken back to her dear little grotto,
Which
one
is-
room where she had been imprisoned.
It's almost like that Stockholm Syndrome thing, right?
It really shows you the complicated nature of trauma, how even a place of suffering can become a source of, I don't know, twisted comfort after years of isolation and deprivation.
It makes you wonder what was going through her mind.
Absolutely.
Blanche ended up living out the rest of her days in that hospital, dying in 1913 at the age of 64.
So she did get to experience some level of freedom, at least for a little while.
Yeah, but it's hard to imagine that the psychological scars ever truly healed.
Definitely not.
I did find one detail really touching, though.
Oh, what's that?
She really loved flowers. Even after all those years, she still remembered their names, their scents, their colors.
She's like a little glimmer of beauty amidst all that darkness.
Yeah, like the testament to the power of nature and simple pleasures to bring comfort, even in the face of unimaginable hardship.
I think it's a good reminder for all of us that even when things seem really dark, there's always something to hold on to, something to appreciate.
Absolutely. So after this deep dive into Blanche Monnier's story, what can we learn from it? How can we apply it to our own lives today?
It's a story that stays with you, that's for sure.
It really does.
I think for me, it's a reminder to be more aware of what's going on around us. Yeah, to notice the people who might be struggling to question those societal norms that can sometimes allow these terrible things to happen.
You know, it's fascinating because Blanche's story isn't unique, right? Throughout history, there have been so many cases of people, often women, labeled as hysterical or mad and then locked away.
Absolutely.
Blanche's case could almost be seen as a representation of a much bigger issue, the way mental illness has been misunderstood and mistreated.
Yeah, the lack of understanding back then definitely played a role in her fate, and it highlights how far we've come in recognizing and treating mental illness.
But also how much further we still have to go,
Oh,
right?
I totally.
We still need to work on destigmatizing mental health issues and making sure people get the help they need.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
We've explored the historical context, the legal battles, those complex family dynamics, and the societal norms that all played a part in this tragedy.
But at the end of the day, I think the biggest question that lingers is, what would we have done?
It's a tough question to ask yourself, isn't it?
Imagine being in Poitiers back in 1901. Would we have been the one to send that letter?
Knowing the risks.
Yeah, would we have spoken up even if it meant going against everyone else?
It's easy to say we would, but it's a different story when you're actually in that situation.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case so powerful. It challenges us to examine our own values and our own courage.
To think about what we would do when faced with something like this.
If Blanche Monnier's story has piqued your interest, we encourage you to check out the sources we mentioned today and maybe even do some digging of your own.
There are plenty of other stories out there just waiting to be discovered.
And remember, keep asking those tough questions. Keep learning. And most importantly, keep your eyes open to the world around you. You never know what you might uncover.